Have you read this caption on that fucking picture? When visiting this factory, Kim is reported to have recognized Hello Kitty designs and been excited that North Korea were illegally producing them. That is North Korea's true eternal sin, that they copied the Hello Kitty fucking like, what the fuck? Are you serious?
Alright, calm down, Heitor.
Hey, what's up? Okay, we're replying to this video about North Korea, which is in turn also a reply to a different video where like this dude goes there and he's like, "Oh, this is pretty fucking sweet, man. Like this country's awesome. People have been making up some fucking lies and shit." But then she's replying to that and saying, "Actually, that was a lie in turn," and it's like the fucking Matrix. Like you're there, but like people don't realize that like it's horrible, and there's like concentration camps like 2 miles from where they're at in Pyongyang. It's just like a fake plastic city, you know, the usual shit. So.
Yeah, like so somebody went to the DPRK and they said it was actually good, and now she's responding to that, saying that it's actually not good, even though the person went there and saw what it was like.
Yeah, I mean, I think a point should be reiterated that, like, I mean, we don't really think that North Korea is, like, fucking perfect or anything. I mean, it's still, like, poor and shit. It's a poor third world country.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, some people think it's like, oh, yeah, it's, like, flawless. I mean, like, it's not flawless, but, I mean, it's not, like, what they say it is, and that should be pointed out. I think that's worth pointing out.
Some of you may have seen some recent drama concerning North Korea, of all things, and a travel vlogger called Fun for Louis, my good friend Louis Cole, who I love and respect a lot. Basically, for those of you who don't know, Louis made a series of travel vlogs of when he went to North Korea, and he showed more like a positive spin on North Korea, such as like water parks and going surfing and things like that. And he's been criticized, whether you believe rightly or not, for not mentioning the human rights atrocities and all of the bad things that are going on in North Korea, because it's bad. It's bad. North Korea is my one passion project, actually. Some of you may remember last year we raised $25,000 for Liberty in North Korea, which is a charity that helps the refugees and people who have defected from North Korea. I have read a butt ton of books. I have seen every documentary you could possibly throw.
Okay, I'm gonna stop.
Oh, look at you. Oh,
when she
look
says
at me.
that
I've watched some fucking Netflix.
Yeah, I've watched all the documentaries. Like, that doesn't really teach you anything. I mean, that's maybe more damaging than anything else. That's like saying I know all about the government because I watched a lot of Alex Jones.
They're all copy-paste. Like, I've watched a lot of the documentaries, too, and they're all exactly the fucking same.
I mean, yeah, like, the documentaries are so bad that you're better off not even watching them. There's more fiction than fact in those documentaries.
What was that one before where, like, some lady got her picture taken with a flash camera and she thought it was like a fucking, like, flashbang going off or some shit? Like, what? It's just pure ridiculousness.
Yeah. Oh yeah, there was like that one classic BBC documentary where it was like, oh, look at this collective farm where they're not growing anything and it's clearly the fucking winter.
Oh no, I think the best thing is he went into a North Korean library and asked for 1984.
I mean, how does that work, dude? Is it just like the movie Idiocracy where they're like watering the crops with Mountain Dew? Like they just don't know how it works? Like what do they think is like going on in this fucking country?
Yeah, I mean...
My god, this movie is bad.
This is a very basic, very brief, very summarized history of North Korea. So let's start off in 1910, before there was even a North and South Korea. The country was simply called Korea and it was occupied by Japan. I'm not going to pretend to know too much about this period in Korea's history, but from what I have read, and I have read a fair bit, Japanese weren't too kind to the Koreans during this occupation, despite their commerce rapidly expanding and the sudden exposure to cultural things such as television or radio.
What was that with talking about television? Like, they didn't fucking have television in 1910.
I love how she casually says that the Koreans were used to strengthen Japan's production. It's like,
that's
you mean slavery?
Yeah.
Slavery? Like, what?
They weren't too nice to the Koreans. I mean, yeah, I mean, you could say that, I suppose, but
The Soviet Union declared war on Japan, eventually defeating Japan's Kwangtung army. The defeat of the Kwangtung army essentially sped up the surrender of Japan when the Allies bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. As a result of losing the war,
I don't like the fact that she also says like the Soviet defeat of the Japanese army sped up the surrender while the nuke was what really did it.
Oh, that's so dumb. I hate that shit.
Yeah, 'cause,
especially
like,
when they don't mention like the invasion of Manchuria.
Yeah, like the Soviets destroyed the Japanese army, but of course it was like the destruction of this civilian city that did it.
Like, look at the statistics. I mean, the amount of like Japanese soldiers that were killed by the Americans throughout the entire war was basically the same amount. Like killed or captured by the Soviet Union during the invasion of Manchuria, which was like 3 weeks long.
Yeah, I mean, the Soviets annihilated the Japanese army. Meanwhile, the Americans just bombed a couple of cities and killed 200,000 civilians, but those cities had no strategic or military importance whatsoever.
after a very, very long period of angry negotiations, Korea was split between the Soviet Union and the United States along the 38th parallel, which is a circle of latitude around the Earth 38 degrees north of the equator. This left 16 million Koreans in the south and 9 million Koreans in the north. In 1948, 3 years after the end of World War II, after failing to reach unification, the two states were officially split into the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, or DPRK, or North Korea, supported by the Soviet Union, and South Korea, which was supported by the United States.
Syngman Rhee was fucking trained in the United States, by the way. Just a little factoid there.
The guy was basically a fucking dictator. He basically did a massacre, like the Bodo massacre. Just look it up.
The Bodo League massacre was a massacre and war crime against communists and suspected sympathizers. At least 100,000 people were executed on suspicion of supporting communism. Others estimate 200,000 deaths. The massacre was wrongly blamed on the communists. The December massacres were a series of politically motivated executions carried out by the South Korean government. The Rhee regime received criticism from the international community. The Gangwon massacre was a massacre conducted by the South Korean forces. Of 1,300 unarmed civilians in the Gangwon County, the victims were collaborators with the Korean People's Army. The Gyeokan massacre was a massacre conducted by the South Korean Army between February 9, 1951 and February 11, 1951. Unarmed citizen in Gyeokan. The victims included 385 children. The Goyeongjong Cave massacre. South Korean authorities arrested and summarily executed several individuals along with their families on suspicion of sympathizing with North Korea. The Namyangju massacre, a mass killing conducted by South Korean police and local militia forces between October 1950 and early 1951 in Namyangju. More than 460 people were summarily executed, including at least 23 children under the age of 10.
She basically says that the country was just somehow split into two. It doesn't go into any kind of detail how that happened or what the conflict between these two countries was. Like, the conflict between these two countries was basically that there used to be one Korea, which was led by the Korean anti-colonial resistance, which was largely led by, basically two groups of people. Communists and then patriotic or nationalistic people.
This is, typical of like World War II.
Yeah, very typical.
Anti-colonial. Yeah.
There was the People's Korea. The People's Korean government was there, and it was basically the actual government of Korea. But because there were communists involved, the US couldn't have that, so they forced the people's government into the north and set up what was called the American military government in the south, which was literally a military, like it was a government of the US military.
The American military government, wow, that sounds really fucking like democratic and shit.
Yeah, it wasn't even Koreans, it was literally American soldiers.
People's Republic of Korea, PRK, was a short-lived provisional government that was organized with the aim to take over control of Korea shortly after the surrender of the Empire of Japan at the end of World War II. It operated as the government in late August and early September 1945 until the United States Army military government in Korea was established by the United States of America. After that it operated unofficially, and in opposition to the United States military government, until it was forcibly dissolved in January 1946.
So it was like a military junta, basically. So that lasted for a little bit, and then they created the Syngman Rhee dictatorship, which took over South Korea.
And then, they canceled the fucking vote, too. They were going to vote on someone to lead the country and unify it, and then when they realized, like, almost everyone was going to vote for Kim Il-sung, they canceled the elections and said it was, like, fraud and shit.
Yeah, like in North Korea, they had a vote, they had an election, and Kim Il-sung was elected. And then in South Korea, they didn't have elections. People say that, like, Kim Il-sung was just, like, some random guy who was just somehow manufactured in the Soviet Union and then brought there, just implanted into the North to become the dictator. But I mean, he was like one of the people in the anti-Japanese resistance movement who was elected as the leader. I mean, it's very similar to Cuba, it's very similar to Vietnam and other places. It's one of those cases where basically there's an anti-colonial movement which isn't like overtly communist, but it's made more and more communistic over time because the Americans keep fucking with them and forcing them to side with the USSR.
Yeah.
Because the USSR supported colonial countries, whereas Americans tended to support the fucking colonizers.
Yeah, I mean, the imperialist intervention polarizes them because a lot of them start out, they're just like, alright, well, I just want to get rid of the imperialists, and then more and more, it's like the imperialists who get funded by other imperialists, and then just the normal people end up going over the communists.
Yeah, because the communists are like the only people who actually do the anti-colonial struggle, so it just happens like that.
Yeah.
The US appointed a man called Syngman Rhee as head of the Provisional Government of the South, and the Soviet Union designated the role of Premier of North Korea to a man called Kim Il-sung. Hey ho, let's go.
Syngman Rhee was appointed. I mean, that's true, because he wasn't elected, but it says that the Soviets just designated Kim Il-sung as the leader.
He's just some random guy,
Yeah, they didn't fucking designate him. He was literally just the guy the Koreans elected.
He's like, well, I mean, like, what Americans see George Washington as, like, he was basically that for the Koreans. I mean, not to compare the two, because George Washington was a fucking douchebag for the most part, but, yeah. It's the same level of, like, reverence for national leaders and shit.
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of like the founding father of Korea.
Kim Il-sung's origin story is one that's met with a lot of mystery and a lot of controversy. What is known is that back in 1926, Kim, who was still going under his birth name of Kim Song-ju, founded the Down with Imperialism Union, which was an anti-Japanese organization created to fight against Japanese occupation of Korea. In 1931, Kim joined the Communist Party of China along with many anti-Japanese guerrilla groups, including the Northeast Anti-Japanese United Army. In 1935, Kim took on the name Kim Il-sung, which means Kim become the sun, and was put in charge of a division of hundreds of men in 1937 at the young age of 24. He later went on to become a major in the Soviet Red Army, where
he seems very fatigued over reciting these basic facts.
End of World War II. This is how he
Just
became
like,
known to the Soviet Union.
Well,
and was
yeah, I
eventually
mean, they
given
did
power
kind of
over
kick
world.
out a world imperialist power, but it doesn't matter. Whatever.
That's what you do when you are a fucking resistance fighter fighting for what's right.
Yeah, like, she basically seems like very fatigued because Kim Il-sung was actually a good guy who fought against the Japanese.
He was just a guerrilla fighter fighting against, like, horrific colonialism. Like, whatever. I mean, he was just some random guy the Soviets invented.
It's not like that. That guy fought against, the Japanese, who are basically the Asian version of the Nazis.
Yeah, I mean, this is like saying that Nelson Mandela was, like, invented by Fidel Castro.
That's like Margaret Thatcher's in a nutshell. Like, she'd think that fucking Nelson Mandela was a terrorist.
In his 46-year rule over North Korea, Kim Il-sung established a cult of personality, erecting statues of himself.
Like, the Americans accused the Koreans of, like, having a whole cult of personality, but they literally destroy a mountain to, like, put the faces of their presidents in it. Like, say that's not a fucking, like, code of personality.
Those who opposed him were either sentenced to death by execution or sent to prison camps, with both methods of punishment still reportedly being used in the country today.
And you're like, oh, well, they have prison camps. A method still in use by them today.
Method still being used by fucking everyone.
Prison camps, huh? Wow, what a fucking crazy-ass thing.
Can you believe they actually lock people up for crimes?
That's fucking insane, dude. They're gonna put you in a camp and, like, lock you up and shit.
I mean, what is the difference between a prison camp and a actual, like, a big-ass prison? What's the difference?
The difference
they're just called camps to make them intimidating.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't know, like, not to mention that, like, even in, like, U.S. prisons and jails, they'll, like, feed you shit that's, like, not meant for human consumption, like, fucking sour milk and fucking, like, brown, gross food and shit. When people act like North Korea is, like, all different for having all this shit, it's like, they don't really want to examine their own place of origin.
Yeah, exactly. Like, not to mention how many people the American cops kill and all that. Or how many people die in jail or in prison.
Refuse medical treatment, shit like that.
Say reportedly because North Korea has consistently denied the existence of these prison camps, and I'm not about to get shot.
I know she said she's, like, read a lot about North Korea, but she still doesn't know that they already accept that the prison camps are a thing.
Yeah, like, I have never seen them deny it. On the contrary, I've seen them talk about them on multiple occasions. So I don't know where this idea comes from that they totally deny the existence of prisons.
Sung, along with the Soviet ambassador to North Korea, Terentij Stoichkov, successfully convinced Soviet leader Joseph Stalin, heard of him, that South Korea were planning to invade the North, and that invading South Korea first would be welcomed by the people of the South.
The Bodo League massacre was a massacre and war crime against communists and suspected sympathizers. At least 100,000 people were executed on suspicion of supporting communism. Others estimate 200,000 deaths.
And somehow...
Okay, stars. Fucking stop. I wanted to go over this. There's actually this book called Killing Hope by William Blum. It's pretty good. It goes over all sorts of like imperialist invention all over the world and shit. And there's this, maybe I can give you the link to put it in the video description or whatever. But there's this part on page 44 where it talks about the supposed invasion by the North. I mean, it makes sense that like both the South and the North would have been planning to invade each other. But, I mean, there's a lot of circumstantial evidence here that might actually suggest that the South may have invaded the North. First, like it talks about the capture of certain cities on the by the South on the day of the invasion or whatever and shit. And it talks about Douglas MacArthur talking about how the South attacked and shit, and then he ends up recanting it and shit. I mean, there's a lot of stuff here that's, like, not known by a lot of people that, I mean, you should probably read and just, see if you want.
You already did, like, another video talking about how the South invaded the North, right?
Yeah, that was based on a Guardian article. Basically, she acts like it's just a totally crazy idea that the South could have invaded first. Like, it's not a crazy idea. I mean, there's plenty of evidence to support it. She acts like Kim Il-sung was just crazy for thinking that, but I mean, I'm gonna link it in the description, but there's like a Guardian article which talks about how South Korea and the US both admitted to a number of different atrocities during the Korean War, and also that the South sent like hundreds of guerrilla groups to invade the North, like in like multiple times during 1949. So I mean, yeah, technically the North invaded in 1950, but I mean a year earlier the South had already started to send guerrilla troops to capture villages. So I mean, if that's not provocation, then I don't know what is. Not to mention, like, she doesn't explain what the root cause of this conflict is, and the root cause of this conflict is that the legitimate government of Korea was pushed forcibly into the North by the Americans, and that's why the DPRK and the people in the North see the Americans as basically just another occupier, just like Japan. They think that it's occupying half of the Korean peninsula and they need to drive them out to unite Korea. That's what's going on. It's not like they're not crazy. I mean, that's literally it. That's what started this whole thing. Does it really sound so crazy to think that because there were communists involved in the people's government, the US didn't allow them to be there? Because they've been doing that everywhere. Like, they did the same exact thing in Vietnam. Literally the same exact thing.
June 1950, with the support of the Soviet Union and China, the Korean People's Army, the Army of the North, crossed over the 38th parallel into the South, with the intent of arresting and executing Syngman Rhee, the head of South Korea. In early July, US forces arrived to defend the South, and over the next 3 years, a lot of back and forth, horrible
their army
fighting
was
occurred.
shit,
And figures
so
of the
they
death
needed
toll
the US
vary
to
a
help them.
lot, but anywhere between 2.5 and 5 million people died in the Korean War. Both sides were at a stalemate, and despite the ongoing death of the troops from either side, neither side was making any progress. Negotiations for an armistice began, and on the 20th
That's ridiculous, dude. She just went over the entire war, like, in, like, a minute and a half. And she's like, oh, well, neither side was really making any progress. Like, no.
Yeah, the North annihilated the South.
Yeah, and then the U.S. came in and eventually beat them back. And then when the North was beat over the 38th parallel, the Chinese came and helped them, and then they beat them back over the 38th parallel. I mean, it went back and forth constantly for the entire 3 years. And just be like, oh yeah, they just eventually decided to make an armistice. Like,
Yeah.
no, there's
Yeah,
a
I mean,
lot of
they were pretty
problems
much
with that.
even, you know.
Yeah.
Like, the North annihilated the South, so then the US came in and killed 4 million Koreans. She also said that it was like a crazy idea that the North thought the South was going to invade, and that if they actually attacked, then the people in the South would support them. And that's like a crazy idea. But, I mean, that's not crazy at all. I mean, there were tons of people in the South who supported, you know, the DPRK and People's Government of Korea. I mean, that's why Syngman Rhee and his buddies had to kill all those people. Like, that's why there's so many of these massacres that South Korea committed, because they had to kill all these people who would have supported the People's Government.
Yeah, I mean, this is not even like a fucking left thing versus right thing. I mean, it's just like a neutral, like, some people support the state and some people don't.
Yeah, like in the Guardian article that I talked about, it was like a bunch of American soldiers talking about how they just gathered people into crowds and then just like gunned them down with machine guns because they were suspected of being leftists.
Still at war today. Although earlier this year, North Korea reportedly approached the US about ending the war formally, the talks of which were scrapped because North Korea decided to conduct a nuclear test. Good one. By the time
That thing about the nuclear test is like completely bullcrap, because even after the nuclear thing, they pretty much said that they would stop the nuclear program if like the South Korea and like the Americans stopped the war games that they were doing. Have a peace talk.
But Heitor, don't you know that nukes are only for like rich Western countries, not for poor third world countries? I mean, if they do it, then it's evil.
I mean,
Yeah. Like,
you're not allowed to have any nukes while I sit on this giant nuclear stockpile.
Yeah, like, we are the only one that can have nukes.
Like, what do they think the DPRK is gonna do with the nuke when, like, since they have a nuke, like, what do they think they're gonna do with it? I mean, it's a defensive weapon. You can only use it to basically retaliate if somebody attacks you. You can't actually win a war with a nuke, like, not anymore.
Yeah, they're just gonna launch that shit as soon as they get it. They're just gonna like, yep, fucking launch it. Fuck it.
Yeah, I mean, they've had it for quite a while. If they actually wanted to just use it to do something crazy, they would have done it. They have it, and they know that as long as they have it, the US can't invade and kill them all. Like, that's basically the whole point of having one. And that's also why the US is so much against them having one.
due to a massive focus on industrial production, the North Korean economy started to recover quite quickly from the war. And until the 1960s, the growth was higher there than in the South. In 1994, after a heart attack, Kim Il-sung passed away. His son Kim Jong-il had begun taking over duties as early as 1992, but after Kim Il-sung's death, he was made their new leader and quickly implemented a policy called Songun, or military first. The policy ensured a massive chunk of the economy and the country's resources being allocated to the military. With less money being allocated to farmers, along with flooding in the mid-90s that devastated crops and infrastructure, North Korea entered a period of extreme widespread famine.
At least she acknowledges that it was caused by a natural disaster, unlike the Holodomor and like a shitload of other like anti-communist fucking bullshit.
Yeah, like usually they just say it was somehow just the fault of North Korea for doing something. She pretty much gave a lot of the reasons, like why it happened, you know, natural disasters, bad weather, but of course also the fact that since the Soviet Union fell, they lost almost all of their trade, which, you know, any other country would have collapsed as a result of that.
Same thing in Cuba.
So there was that. Like the Songun policy, I mean, the way Songun works, like it doesn't have a crippling impact on the economy the way a traditional policy of just increasing military spending would have on a different country. Because the way Songun works is that, like, yeah, there's more soldiers, there's more all of this military stuff, but the soldiers, they do construction, they build roads, they do farming. Like, most of the soldiers spend, like, most of their time farming, because, like, somebody needs to do that. So the only way they can actually support a really big military is if the military actually does something useful instead of just standing around waiting for a war to start. Anyway, the reason why they wanted the military first policy or the Songun policy was of course because they thought that, well, the Soviets are gone now. So, I mean, if the Americans attack now, then we're kind of fucked, so we have to prepare. She blames it on the Koreans themselves, but I think it's the fault of the American occupation.
I mean, they're actually under threat of fucking invasion constantly, whereas, like, the U.S., like, the U.S. puts their military first all the fucking time. It takes up, like, almost 50% of the fucking budget, and then if you suggest that maybe the U.S. should not spend so much money, they're like, no! We're gonna be attacked and shit. Like, when was the last time the U.S. was fucking attacked by, like, legitimate military power? I mean, it's fucking ridiculous, dude.
At least the DPRK military it's like an actual defensive force against a foreign occupier, like, that's right next to them.
The country's split in half. Like, they're in a war, they're split in half.
It doesn't matter what president is in power in the U.S. always attacks a foreign country. So North Koreans, they figured out that sooner or later.
That's why they're so militarized, though. I mean, like, anti-imperialist countries and shit. It's because they understand, like, that's the situation. Like, they're going to be attacked. That's why, I believe it was Bolivia. They just founded a new anti-imperialist, military school or whatever. It's basically supposed to be like the opposite of the School of Americas and shit. I mean, there's a reason why these people are so fucking armed to the teeth. I mean, they understand what's going to happen if, it was otherwise.
This time, South Korea also began to aid the North under their Sunshine Policy, which was basically a policy where the South would be nice to the North. Which is nice. That policy is officially no longer in effect as of 2010 after North Korea conducted nuclear tests.
For God's sake, those goddamn motherfuckers with their nukes, dude. I mean, like the West totally doesn't have a nuclear stockpile, like hundreds of thousands of fucking nukes or anything. Those bastards fucking testing nuclear weapons.
And it's not even accurate. Like, the reason the so-called Sunshine Policy ended, and like the North praises this period, this sunshine period, like they thought it was great, but she's saying that they somehow sabotaged it and caused it to stop. But no, I mean, the reason the Sunshine Policy stopped was because there was a new president in South Korea.
She basically sends the fucking police to, like, suppress whatever protest happens against her fucking government.
Wait, it's the daughter of Syngman Rhee? So you're telling me that person's related to the person who was in power before? Hereditary monarchy, just like the North Korea. Hereditary monarchy, that's what it is.
Okay, my bad. She's not the daughter of Syngman Rhee. She's the daughter of the South Korean dictator who came after that, but anyway. Different South Korean dictator.
Oh, okay.
Park Chung-hee was a South Korean president, dictator, and a military general who led South Korea from 1961 until his assassination in 1979.
Oh, he was assassinated?
Apparently so.
Yeah, but I mean, obviously the South Koreans support the government, so...
Educated in Switzerland, Kim Jong-un is the first of the three leaders to have been born after the state was founded, and he appears to have a somewhat softer approach to free markets and international trade than his father and grandfather did. However, since assuming power in 2011, many members...
I just want to point out how cute those socks were.
Oh yeah, goddamn.
You stop for no fucking reason.
Staring at a fucking arsenal of socks.
These are the secret weapons of North Korea, cute socks. My fucking god.
North Korean dictator inspects nuclear arsenal. 2050.
However, since assuming power in 2011, many members of his father's previous government have reportedly been purged and or executed. And whilst the fed to wild dogs rumor about Jang Sung-taek proved to be rubbish...
I mean, we've gone over this before, obviously, but I mean, confirmed by who? It's like, this, like, executed by flamethrower, like, killed by bayonet, mortar, like, fucking, like, Gears of War style execution, like, look at that shit, and it's just like, look at the source and it goes to a news media outlet, and then you look at the source for that and it goes to another news media outlet, and then you look at the source for that and it just goes back to, like,
the
nothing. Yeah, just recycle each other.
Fucking gibbed.
Yeah.
I mean, she's like, yeah, I mean, they didn't, like, that story when they supposedly fed that guy to a bunch of, like, hungry dogs, I mean, yeah, that was fake, but of course the flamethrower story is real. I mean,
yeah, like,
why?
And that story of, like, killing a guy with an AA gun was also real, even though, like, Like, that story has been, like, debunked so many fucking times, the one about the AA gun. Like, the guy literally, like, showed up on, like, North Korean state TV, like, 1 week after he gets so-called executed.
Resurrected.
And,
He respawned.
He
yeah, like,
respawned.
Yeah.
He respawned
Yeah, like
and
that-
then he rocket jumped and he died and he respawned.
like,
It's like they haven't got any money, but they execute everybody like it's Dr. fucking Evil.
Yeah.
She says that it was confirmed by the North Korean state media, but that's so blatantly false, and it's so easy to check too, so like, why even say that? I mean, she obviously hasn't checked.
The capital of Pyongyang. Areas outside of the capital are still largely unreported on, as no tourism groups or press outlets are allowed to visit anywhere outside of a very strictly guided tour route. If you
She says that, like, the country outside of the capital is, like, totally unreported. I mean, that's so baseless. I mean, and she says that no tourism groups have ever gone basically outside the capital. Like, that's so blatantly false. Like, you know, Aram Pan has made so many videos where he goes all over the country. There's even other people who have made plenty of videos going to other cities and other places, even in the countryside. Like, even I personally know people who have been to places outside the capital. I don't know what she has been reading and what she has been watching, but I mean, because this is so inaccurate. It just sounds like she read like a single BuzzFeed article and that was it.
told what you can and what you can't document, and you never know whether what you're seeing is real or if it's been set up by the North Korean government's propaganda machine.
Like, she says that you never know if it's real or if it's set up just for you. I mean, I don't think any random tourist is important enough for that to happen.
Yeah.
Like, oh, they've manufactured this entire city just for you.
yeah, like, they made this fake children's hospital just for you.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize going to North Korea was going to be like the Truman Show.
Strictly guided route. So is like fucking like Waterworld like part of that strictly guided route, like where that guy went, where he's like fucking like surfing and shit in
Yeah,
the
like-
video, or
In May, Singapore-based photographer Aram Pan took his GoPro camera into North Korea. Alright, Aram, how did this actually go down? How were you actually allowed to do this?
I didn't want to go in like, all sneaky and, hide my camera and stuff like that. So I figured maybe I should just ask them and see how it goes.
So was there one thing that they didn't let you do that you wanted to do?
No, not that I didn't encounter anything like that.
She says that, in the children's hospital there's no patients, but I mean, fuck, when the guy was taken to a hospital there were plenty of patients, so I mean, sometimes you see patients, sometimes you don't, but I mean, of course it's not fucking all just staged. Like, why would they even do that? Why would they have a real hospital and a fake hospital? Like, that makes no sense.
yeah, I mean, there's just a bunch of like nurses walking around with like plastic beds and shit. They're all empty. There's like 100 just empty beds, and the nurses are just walking around aimlessly.
If any citizen does manage to escape the country, known as defecting, and are found in China, the country's repatriation policy ensures that if they're caught, they are sent straight back home, where I assume they are not greeted with flowers and a basket of puppies.
So if you illegally leave the United States and then they find you somewhere else, what happens? Like if you escape to Canada without a visa, what would happen?
They would send you back.
Really?
I mean, that's basically fucking Hitler right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, I bet the US government won't send you a basket full of puppies.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, it's like
we have to go over this thing again, but like, I mean, yeah, you can leave the country, you just have to leave, legally. There's citizens of the DPRK who are working in other countries or studying in other countries.
There's an embassy of like the DPRK around here, like the capital, and I think I saw a photo from an actual student, like with two Brazilian communists, and like they were holding this version of the Brazilian flag, which had like the Juche symbol inside the circle.
My mom's Taekwondo grandmaster is like from Pyongyang.
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, he mainly teaches in Bulgaria, I think, but he's been He's been here, like, in my small-ass Finnish town a couple of times as well.
Reports of public executions for speaking out against the state are common. You can be in prison for something as simple as folding a newspaper with the leader's face on it.
Like, okay, so she gets the, the fact that the eaten by hungry dogs thing was false, but then she falls for that.
I don't understand how the minds of these people work. I mean, they should at least look at the source of where this information is supposedly coming from.
And look at the sources she gives, like The Real North Korea by Andrei Lankov, Nothing to Envy by Barbara Demick, The Aquarium of Pyongyang by Kang Cho-Hwan, In Order to Live by, like, basically, and like she even says, like, in the description, these books have been called into question about their accuracy. However, I believe these books still be informative about North Korea and are worth reading.
I mean, most of these stories, if you actually look at the source, they originate from South Korean newspapers, usually like shitty tabloids that are not even considered reliable among South Koreans. Like Chosun Ilbo is like a particularly bad one. That's like where most of these stories originate in. So like the American media and the British media, they just take a Chosun Ilbo article, they translate it, and then they publish it, and then rest of the countries take that and publish that, and that's how all these stories spread, basically.
Ultimately, this video wasn't completely dreadful, but and it wasn't malicious either. You can kind of tell that it had good intent behind it, but at the same time, it needed to be corrected.
I kind of feel bad because these people probably have legitimate intentions. They just are completely unaware of like what the actual situation is.
But anyway, I think that's about it. We thank you for watching, and I will see you guys next time.
Later. I don't think I'm that important. Yeah. We can just start it.
Oh no, well that was like, there were like quite a few comments saying where the fuck is Raven gone on when we last did one of these.
Yeah, just say,
yeah, they were like, who the fuck are these two guys? Like, we want Raven back.
What the fuck?
Come on, they're not even that bad.